Bushra Manawati actually sang it directly to Congressman Ed Royce. Bushra, as an 8th grader, with an incredible voice, and it was an ode to him to thank him for what he's just done. And again, I'll share with you what he has done in just a bit. But when it came time to go ahead and plan this program this year, the 3rd anniversary for our Syrian Revolution, there were many opinions as to really what we should do. Many of us are still celebrating the revolution, and that's actually our primary message today, and that is that the revolution is still going on, no matter what you hear, no matter how you feel. I know sometimes we all feel a little depressed. The revolution is still going, and it's going strong, and our people on the inside are fighting hard for it, so we're going to support them as much as we can till the very end. So please take that message with you today. The other message today is that advocacy absolutely works, and I know some of you were here early and you saw why it works. But those are our 2 main messages today. But going back to what I was saying is, do we celebrate? Do we mourn our martyrs and everything that's happening right now? Those who are hungry, with no homes, or refugees, or thousands and thousands of people, losing everything they own. How do we commemorate? And so we decided we just wanted something simple, something where we can get together and rejoice and celebrate certain things, but mourn other things. And if you got a chance to walk our exhibit in our symposium, you saw the timeline, you saw a refugee tent, our, I don't even know how to say it in English, Mashra Midani, and then our timeline. But what you see in the corner there is really how most of our people are living now. This is home. It looks undone, but home is undone right now for so many of them. So it was important for us to still get together and look back at our history, look at our presence, but talk about what we need to do to go into a peaceful future, hopefully. And what we saw from Ed Royce today certainly gives us a lot of hope. I couldn't stop beaming yesterday when I heard the news that Ed Royce has decided to write a resolution on behalf of Syria. And I'm going to have someone that's a little more cognizant of what the resolution is all about talk to you about that. But the Syrian American Council has done so much in the past few months, and even today, actually. As we celebrate the revolution here, there's so much more even going on directly in Washington, D.C. Our SAC National Group is hard at work. Many of them met with many Congress members. From our own board members, we've got Hussam Ayloush, Hena Dianwan, Nada Hashim, of course many activists as well, that are out there meeting and talking to our Congress members because they have to absolutely hear from us. And I, as the chair of the Government Relations Committee for the Syrian American Council, I hear a lot of, it won't make a difference. And if you hear me MC, I know you hear the same words from me, but I believe in repetition breeds recognition. But I always like to give this analogy. We can do 0%. We can sit and do nothing and decide that this is all a conspiracy, and there's nothing we can do about it. And then there's 100% where everything is perfect. Well, certainly it'll never be 100%, but certainly we cannot stand for 0% either. We have to go somewhere in the middle, and it takes a lot of conversation, a lot of talk, a lot of going to our members, and discussing things and telling them all about us as American citizens. And we have proof that it does work. And I'm actually going to ask Anissa Abetia to come up for just 5 minutes to share with you directly what we're doing. Although I chair the committee, Anissa really does so much more for our chapter here. So Anissa, if I can have you come up.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome everybody. My name is Anissa Abetia. I'm the field coordinator for Syrian American Council. For those of you who have missed, earlier today, Ed Royce came and spoke to us about a resolution that was just passed last night. This is something that we've been working with him for the past couple of months, and our DC office has been very active in it. Two of the most important things is, one, it's a resolution to get the humanitarian aid delivered more effectively inside Syria. Currently, right now, most aid organizations have to go through the Assad regime in order to deliver aid. We would like that to end. The second thing is that we would like the money that the United States has already allocated to Syrian humanitarian aid to go through Syrian American organizations who are already on the ground, who have been there for 3 years and know people and the situation and what needs to be addressed. And the last and really most important piece is for the United States to no longer recognize the Assad regime as a legitimate government in Syria. Now, all of these have very real and serious implications legally. Once the United States is written into law, once the United States no longer recognizes Assad as the legitimate ruler, we can then turn over the UN seat to the opposition. We can then bypass him when it comes to humanitarian aid. So there's lots of things that we can do to move forward in all of these, as Suzanne said, between 0 and 100. But we really need your help. How this resolution started was that a delegation of various Syrian American organizations came together to meet with Ed Royce. Mohammed Khan, who's a good friend of the community, put that meeting together. There's so much more that we can do, but us here as American citizens, and I just want to ask, who here is an American citizen? A lot of times we feel helpless, that we can't do anything for Syria, that really helps Syria. We see today that this resolution, that with our determination, our phone calls, our letters, we can do something. And this is not the first time SAC National has really done something to affect what's going on the ground in Syria. Recently, SAC National was part of an initiative which did pass to have the UN ambassador, Jaffrey, to limit his movement within 25 miles of New York. There was also last year a very important law passed on the Hill, where the company Rosso Baron Export, there was an embargo placed on them by the United States. And these are the major suppliers, major Russian suppliers of arms to the Assad regime. So, as you can see, we've done a lot of things. We do have a voice, but we need you to be involved. We need to be able to reach out to you as American citizens, as constituents, to many of the congressmen in the state of California. And when you join us and our voices are amplified, we can get this resolution passed into law, because that's the next stage. And if anybody's interested, outside there's going to be a sign-up sheet there. We need your phone number, your address, and your name so we can figure out whose district you're in, so that when we're ready to do another campaign, we can reach out to you and you can know exactly what it is that we're doing. So thank you again, and again, thank you to Congressman Royce and to SAC National for their work.
Thank you, Anissa. And if you're wondering, Congressman Royce is actually the representative for the 39th district, which I think it worked out great that we did the event in his city today, but he basically covers Fullerton, Anaheim Hills, Placentia, Buena Park, Diamond Bar, La Habra Heights, Hacienda Heights, as well as Buena Park, and I might be missing Chino Hills also in Bright. So he covers a large area, and he's also the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, so the fact that he is authoring this resolution is a huge deal for us, so that's why we're so excited today. But now we're even more excited for our panel that's speaking to us directly today.
He gave me the scarf I'm wearing. I got it at an event that some of you were also at. It took place at the Glendale Public Library, where the Arab Americans for Syria, which I refer to as the Civilian, had an event, a pro-Assad event, and they didn't want to allow anybody in with the flag of the revolution or the colors of the revolution. And I learned an important lesson about the duplicity of the Assad folks that day, because first they tried to take away the scarf that someone had given me. They tried to force me to take it off with bully tactics. A couple of big guys, 3 or 4 of them surrounded me, and they told me they were going to call the police, they were going to have me arrested, they were going to do all kinds of things unless I left and took off the scarf. And I refused. And they backed off. And we turned to kind of a celebratory mood because we figured we had beaten them. When one guy came up with the camera and he said, "Can I take a picture of you?" He said, "Are you with the revolution?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Can I take a picture of you with the scarf?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can you take a picture of me with the scarf?" And I said, "Yes." And I handed him the scarf, and he handed me his camera, and I took a picture of him with the scarf, and I gave him back the camera, a little too soon it turned out, and he took off with the scarf. And all the pro-Assad people, they started laughing, because they knew they had babies. What they couldn't accomplish by bullying, they accomplished by stealth. And it gave me an important lesson that day in dealing with those forces. Namely, they are not to be trusted. Not to be trusted as their word. So with that, I want to turn to my prepared remarks. This is the 3rd anniversary of the Days of Rage. But as we all know, the children got a little jump on that. And 9 days before, what really started things off was in Dar, when Assad's police, his gangsters, arrested some young boys for writing on the walls. The people demand the downfall of the regime. And that's what really kicked it off. And all along, this revolution has been about the children. It's been a long, bloody 3 years because Bashar al-Assad has refused to give up the power to the people, because he has been willing to commit mass murder, to terrorize people, to do anything he can to stop the revolution and to cling to his power. And in that, it's been the children that have suffered the most. After 3 years, he still thinks he can kill enough innocents and people will give up. His strategy involves targeting Syrians even more than he targets the fighters. Therefore, he is happy to use indiscriminate weapons like tank fire, barrel bombs, poison gas, because he is targeting whole communities. He is targeting a whole people. And because his goal is to create as much pain and horror as possible. He targets children first and foremost. It is the children that suffered the most in this revolution. The children of Syria have been bombed, shot, tortured, and starved, but nothing shows Assad's desire to target children like his use of sarin gas in East Ghouta last August. You know, poison gas is not a very good weapon of war. It's not a very good weapon to use against soldiers. They will most likely be young people in good health. Plus, they've been trained and prepared. They're likely to have gas masks and protective gear. And they know better than to hide in basements like innocent civilians and their children. You know, back in World War II, they learned that poison gas was not a very good way to kill children. And that's why it hasn't been used on armies very much since. But it is a very good weapon for targeting civilians, as Assad has done. It kills the very old and the very young first, and those in poor health. It kills precisely those people that are the least danger to him. It kills those closest to the ground, those with the smallest body mass and the tiniest lungs. It's a perfect weapon for targeting children, and that's why Assad is using it. He knows nothing will make people run like targeting their children. And while shamefully few countries have come forward to aid the Syrian people, Assad has had the support of an imperialist superpower trying to make a comeback, Russia, and a many regional superpower or imperialist power, Iran, that have made sure that he doesn't run out of bombs and bullets. And even after many soldiers, Syrian soldiers deflected and joined the revolution, and it was looking like he was starting to run out of Syrians who would kill other Syrians, he brought in foreign fighters from Iran and Iraq and Hezbollah to do his dirty work and he started using the barrel bombs non-stop. Russia is one of the 5 members of the United Nations with the power to give any country or dictator a license to kill. And it has elected to give one to Bashar al-Assad and used this veto power to ensure no effective UN action could take place against it. And by the way, all of you I know follow the news and know that there's a referendum going on in Ukraine tomorrow. There are Russian troops in Ukraine that are trying to tear that country apart. And I want it to be known that if the world community had forced Russia, Putin to back off in supporting his boy Assad last year or the year beforehand, I don't think we would be facing these problems in Ukraine right now. I don't think Ukraine would see their country being occupied by Russian troops. Because if there's one thing we've learned about tyrants and dictators, is you can't give them an inch. You can never give in to them. If you appease them, they only go on to bigger and bigger things. And I want it to be recorded, no matter what happens going forward. Now we're almost on the verge of war in Europe. But everybody should remember, no matter what happens going forward, the appeasement of Putin began in Syria, allowing him to support Assad and having no kind of response to that. From the beginning, Assad claimed he was fighting terrorists and not the people. And to make this a reality, to make his dream come true, he let over 1,000 terrorists and criminals out of his jails. Now, some may think he did that just to make room for protesters. But I think it was so that they could infiltrate the opposition, infiltrate the revolution, and gnaw it from the inside. At the same time, giving him exactly the kind of thing he could point to and say, see, I am fighting terrorists. But they're terrorists on the loose. And now we find out he's buying stolen oil from them. He's been supporting him in many, many ways. But the people are wising up to these tricks. And they're being exposed to trauma. He's used many, many tricks to stop the revolution. I don't believe he ever did. He's controlled the news. He's even fabricated the news. He's claimed fake massacres while creating real ones. He tortures reporters who tell the truth. He shoots doctors who heal the wounded. Assad uses rape as a weapon of war. And he has over 185,000 detainees. What I wanted to talk about a little bit, I see I'm running out of time here, is the need for a no-fly zone in Syria. I think we should be demanding this from the international community. It's way overdue. We need this for the children. We need this protection. Nobody wants to see foreign troops on the ground. Nobody wants to see that kind of intervention. But the time is long past where Assad should be allowed to have his Air Force bombing innocent civilians, dropping barrel bombs, using poison gas, most of which he hasn't gotten rid of, in spite of this original, this so-called agreement to get rid of his weapons. But we need to stop Assad from being able to use the death from above. We need to stop him from using his Air Force unopposed. Libyans got a no-fly zone because they had oil that the Westerners needed, that Western Europe needed. They had a particular type of oil that certain European refineries could not do without. And Europe was in an economic crisis. And that's why in Libya they got the humanitarian intervention. It was a fake humanitarian intervention because they were saving themselves. They needed the oil. This hasn't happened in Libya, in Syria, because frankly, Syria has a lot less oil and a lot better air defense. We should demand that, and we should start a campaign for that. And it's going to take a grassroots campaign from the ground up to demand that those that have the means to work together to establish a no-fly zone over Syria. We waited 3 years for this, and the world bodies and responsible leaders have not done this. So I think it's up to us to demand this, and demand it. Whoever, the countries that have the power, work together to establish a no-fly zone over Syria.
You know, this no-fly zone issue, of course, came up at the very beginning when the revolution started, and we weren't able to get any Congress members to appease us and write about it. But with yesterday's developments with Ed Royce, we put our foot in the door somehow, and maybe we can go back to the committee and try to come up with something now. So thank you. We'll reach out to you. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Clay's blogs, they reach a much further audience than our immediate community. And it really reaches an audience that sometimes may say, well, why should we as U.S. citizens get involved? It doesn't affect us. But as you see from his words, this is a global matter, and it will affect the world in one way or another. And that's what we have to teach in our community. So next, we have Mr. Derek Mendez, who I love to listen to. I've heard him several times. He is an investigative journalist from Los Angeles. He's traveled to Camp Zagzadi in Jordan not several times, but a while ago to capture the human story behind the revolution. So he really brings a human face to the revolution, if you will, and has quite a bit to share with us. So I will give it away to Derek Mendez.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to take this thing off. Hold it. Makes it a little easier. So, I've been talking about Syria for a couple of years now, and a lot of it I've been doing, lectures in universities about the geopolitical elements and whatnot. But I really think there's something that needs to be said that's a lot simpler, something that really speaks to it. Because I get up here and tell you all the bad things Assad has done. You guys know that. We've been 3 long years. Well, we can even go back to 50 if we really want to discuss it. But I want to talk to you about resilience. And I just want to tell you a few things too, and look at this coming from an American perspective. And since I've gotten back I was along the border of Jordan. I was there for about 4.5 weeks. And since I've been back, I've been in classrooms and trying to educate kids and trying to get people to understand what is going on and to pay attention. This is the greatest humanitarian crisis of a generation, of the 21st century. And trying to communicate that and figure out what actually can be communicated that American audiences actually listen to has been part of my process. So I'm not going to talk about politics in the direct sense. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about how this happened for me. I was in a classroom and a friend asked me, I have a blog called Bold Type Magazine, which I write with several other people, and he had read it and was like, you're a really great writer, and I was at Zaatari last year. I would like you to come and meet people. I can get you into the camp. And I've been discussing religion and politics, and we should have in common. So I posted on my website a fundraiser, like a Kickstarter. People sent me money so that I could go because Winston Churchill said the first casualty of war is the truth, and I think the same thing can be applied to cable news. I wanted to find out really what was going on. And part of it, when I bought my ticket, was right around April 15th, 2013. And something very big happened in America. It was the Boston bombing. When the Boston bombing happened, America shut down. The news, cable news channels just spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out who did it, trying to make all these claims, and they messed almost everything up. They got everything wrong. But they did one thing really well. And that was that they humanized the victims in the bombing. And they talked to the heroes. This guy in the cowboy hat, his name is Carlos Arendado. Carlos Arendado had lost a son in Iraq. He ran the marathon, and when he got about a mile away, he heard the explosions, and he turned around and he ran back. And he started trying to help people. And when they asked him why, he was like, I felt I had a duty, a human duty to help people. And the other thing we did is we talked about, there were three main deaths. And we talked about them. And we tried to humanize them. This is Crystal Campbell. She's 29 years old, worked at a restaurant. You know, we talked about her, and we showed her picture, and we talked about she worked at a restaurant, and how when she died, everyone on Facebook was talking about how wonderful she is and how important she was. And this picture went viral on Facebook and was spread all over the place. A little boy who ended up dying. This sign says, "No more hurting people, peace." And we talked about him. It's Martin Richard. And we validated them by talking about them. We validated their lives. We talked about his dreams, that he wanted to help people in Europe. We validated them in their death because we talked about who they were. And this is Lu Lingzi. Lu Lingzi is a Chinese grad student at Harvard who ended up dying. And something struck me about this, because President Obama gave a speech, and he talked about the victims. He named all three of them, and he talked about Lu Lingzi, and he said something about, you know, what happened here is not going to be tolerated. He said, you picked the wrong city to whoever did this, that you messed with the wrong city. And something happened. See, in China, a blog post went viral, and it was called, Where You Die Matters. And the point was is that had Lu Lingzi died in a factory in Shanghai making iPods and iPhones and products for Americans to consume, no one would have cared. No one would have paid attention. It was because she died on American soil that we validated her life. We didn't validate her as a human. So that struck me. And so I decided that I wanted to know what was happening in Syria more. I've been reading about it, following it in the news. And all these stories and images were everywhere, if you looked for them. And we weren't talking about who these people were. I didn't know their names. I didn't know where they were from. I didn't know what their hopes and dreams were, who they were as human beings. And that was something that I really wanted to find out. And I know many of you have seen these images. A lot of these ones are pretty famous ones from the revolution. They hit me, and they were children. The other thing I realized is that almost all of them were children, and they got worse. The images of the victims of the children got worse. This actually happened a week after I got back. So I just want to put this in a perspective so that we can understand what I'm talking about. We've got the Boston bombing over here at the end, 3 victims, and that was national news. Just like right now, how we're talking about, 280 people on a flight that are missing, and it doesn't stop being said. We have September 11th, which echoes throughout American culture repeatedly in multifarious ways. And we have Vietnam, which was considered a revolutionary era in democracy and civil rights in this country. This changed the face of politics in other ways, but that's how many people, 58,286 people on the Vietnam Wall. And here's Syria now, and I want to point out something about the deaths in Syria when we look at the numbers. Those are just bodies that they can identify, that they can find. We know that number is bigger than this. And it puts it in a scope of, why isn't this being talked about? Why isn't it not being paid attention? I know in your homes it is talked about, but it's not being talked about as much. And the crisis, geopolitical crisis as far as the humanitarian side of refugees is enormous. If you look at it, and you look at the signs over here, there are somewhere between 12 and 13 million people who are being affected. There are over 2.5 million people who have fled Syria into neighboring countries like the border of Jordan where I was at. Only 20% of them are even in refugee camps. And that number has actually increased by 1 million within 6 months. But we don't even talk about the fact that the amount of people who are just displaced inside of Syria. So what does that look like overall? You can see that there's been a massive increase in the rate of the Syrian crisis as far as the refugee situation goes place. We realize that this is affecting children more than anything. Over 70% of the Syrian refugees are women and children, and around 54% are under the age of 18. The Middle East is a pretty young area. But what does that look like here? So I decided, what's the best way to convey this to Americans? So I decided, let's place the crisis in the happiest place on earth. What if the epicenter was Disneyland? So if you look over here, it's just the 1.2 million refugees under the age of 18, that's outside of the country. It takes up almost all of Anaheim. And then you look at the orange there, it's just the adult refugees. And the purple area, and this is old data, this is from January. The purple actually spreads, and you can show how it reaches all the way out to Los Angeles. So imagine all of these people who are hungry, homeless, in need of any sort of aid, not getting medical assistance. Just think about everywhere you go. You can leave your house right now and drive for an hour and a half and still be where everyone around you is experiencing this. So that's what it looks like in America. So there's this video I'm going to show, and many of you have seen it. It was done by Save the Children, and I think it has some good things to say, and it has some problems, and I want to deconstruct it a little bit, and then I'm going to get to my time that's out to read.
Happy birthday to you. Make a wish. Grenade.
You don't even know it.
I'm done.
Ready or not? Here it comes.
Unconscious of which. Airstrikes on rebel position.
We are going to stay.
This video is one of the most popular things that's actually been shared online about the crisis. The Western audiences started paying attention to this particular video the last couple of weeks. And it does something good by showing the experience, by bringing experience back home to people. It was made actually for a campaign that launched in London. But there are some problems with it that I also want to address. One is the video depicts one of the best case scenarios. And that's the thing, is that you can't show people a bunch of images that are really hard to take, and that can push them away. The other thing I want to address is, why did it have to be a white girl to tell the story? Why did it have to be a Westerner? Because, we all, especially a group of Syrian Americans, we have different layers, different intersections of our identity. Whether we're men or women, or we're grandmothers or teachers, we have different religious affiliations. All those things are layers on top of who we are. But the thing is, it's important, is that when you strip all those things down, and all those things have value, I'm not saying they don't, when you strip all those down, you find something, you find that underneath it all, no matter where we are, especially in this globalized world where we interact with everyone, we're all human. And this is a human problem. This isn't a Syrian problem. This is a human problem. And it takes all of us to be able to see ourselves in the children and not just make sure they look like us, because they still have the same essence, they're still the same thing. So that perspective, and I decided that I wanted to go over there, and it got funding from my website, to go meet people, to find out what their names were, to see who they were. So I went to Zaatari, and I talked to people outside of Zaatari as well. And the first thing I got, it's changed a lot even since I've been there. But you get in there and it's like a prison. There's barbed wire, there are guards, and part of what I'm sharing now is a little different than what I started investigating. I started investigating police corruption and media suppression within the country of Jordan. But everywhere I went, I was surrounded by children who would come and talk to me. Children who were saying that I want to go to school. But at the time, there was only enough facilities to provide for around 10,000 students, and there were about 40,000, roughly 50,000 students who wanted to go to school. So we're talking about 25% of them not getting to go to school. See, children are the ones who are being hurt more. It's not even just the casualties, it's the life afterwards. It's what are you building, where are you going, how do you, this is the future of people. Where are they going to be in 10 years if they don't have an education, they don't have a place to live? Who are they going to be in 10 years if they don't have those things? And people I talk to will have stories about perception. There's one woman I met, if you go to my website, I wrote about her, and I named her Samara. A lot of people in the camp don't want their picture taken or to give names because they're afraid of repercussions against their family members back home, which is actually part of the reason when I went there, my philosophy, I went with a smaller, cheap camera, the little lens, so that I had to be closer than I am to you to take people's pictures, because I saw a lot of press coming with these giant telephoto lenses that could take pictures far away, and it's against my personal philosophy to do that, because if you were telling somebody's story or you are presenting something and you can get published, then you're benefiting off of someone else's misery in a sense, and the best way to do that is to show respect. People aren't animals in zoos to take their misfortune and evade it that way. I want people to feel comfortable with me and say, yes, you can take my picture, yes, I want to talk to you about who I am. So I met this woman, Samara, and she pulled out her bag and asked me to take a picture of it. She just got to Zaatari the week prior. She has 3 children under the age of 9. And she started telling me about her husband had been fighting the FSA. He was a tailor, he made pants. And apparently some of the best pants you can buy, she says. And he'd been missing for 7 months. And she was at home one night, and she was preparing a meal for her children, and she said her prayers, and she was putting them to bed, and as she's tucking them in, the room started shaking. And barrel bombs, I'm not sure if it was a barrel bomb, but some sort of aerial bomb had hit the side of the building and it collapsed the building. And she was able to get outside, but she lived with her parents and her 3 sisters, and 2 of her sisters and both of her parents didn't survive. And she took her 3 kids, and they ended up, heading towards Jordan to get to Zaatari. But as she was telling me this, an airplane flew overhead. And as the airplane flew overhead, she stopped, and she jumped, grabbed her children, and she shuddered. And she waited for 2 minutes, and we sat there in silence. And then she told me, I can never hear that sound without going back there in my mind. I can't be there. And those are the things that I think that is important to understand the difference, because who am I to talk about the Syrian people? Because I'm not Syrian. I can talk about it as a human being. But when I see those images, I see someplace I haven't been. But when you see those images, you go there because maybe you're in Aleppo and you remember eating tea with your grandfather, or you remember going to the market with your mother, and you see these through your memories, that these things get embedded on there. And I can't be one to ever talk about that. That is something that I feel needs to empower the people of Syria to be able to speak for themselves. But I realize the power of those memories, the power of the attachment, the power of the sounds and the sights and the smells and how they stick with you. Let's see if this next slide will work. I met this man who came running up to me, and he's like, Sora, take a picture of my daughter. He just bought her a new dress and found out that she has Down syndrome and having a very difficult time getting the services they need, and that his wife had died when a building fell on her. But he still smiled with joy because he was able to get enough money to buy his daughter a new dress. And I realized that the children have to work fast. A lot of the little girls I met were having to take care of their siblings. And so they would come running up and say hello. All the kids really wanted to talk. And I could see this thing where this girl was like wise beyond her years because of what she had to do and who she had to be and the strength she had to have to be resilient, to stay alive, to be able to smile after everything they went through. I met a lot of boys who were confused and hurt, and he was actually posing that way. I thought it was humorous, actually. I'll start the picture. But I met these boys and I talked to them. This boy in particular, I walked to the edge of the camp, and I had someone from the UN with me, and they told me that apparently this area has been like a burial site for some people who have died during the floods that they had the year prior. And this boy was just standing there, kind of seeming to be mourning. So we sat down and we asked him in Arabic if he was mourning. He didn't say anything. So I took his picture. So I don't know what was in his mind or his heart or what he was feeling. But there was a moment that I felt something, and I felt his sadness. But then something else happened. This boy came running up with a ball. And so he took the ball and he started kicking it, and it turned into a football game, soccer, right on top of where people were allegedly buried. That they learned to make a playground out of this horrible place. That they were able to still find that place in themselves to let go. They got me involved. So we played a little game of soccer. And then they all started, he changed around, he got happy. And they started showing peace signs, and they started doing this. And when I saw it, it reminded me of something. It reminded me of this book. It said, no more hurting people. And I realized that this may be just a really simple message, that, you know, we are all human beings, that we all care, that these children that they're the same here, they're the same there. It doesn't matter all the different ideologies, all the different things, the cultures, the things that may make us think people are different. That's not what this is about. The crisis in Syria is a human crisis. You know, I understand the problem with the compassion gap is geographical, and I also understand that there's a lot of problems in America. There are a handful, I'm sure you know and have stories to tell about prejudices in America and the experiences you had, and fear. We had the reason Assad was able to utilize an idea to say that the FSA and people were terrorists is because the Americans bought that stuff. They didn't look at it, they didn't break it down and say, who are the different people? Why are they there? We want to talk about extremists. A lot of them came through Iraq. 300 escaped Abu Ghraib a couple months ago and joined ISIS and came in. Why are they that way? What happened in Iraq? Why wasn't Iraq contained? What happened? You know, there are things that point back to the U.S. in that way. But I'm not here to talk about politics. I just want to talk about is that there's also a side of the prejudice, and that comes from the fact that I think a lot of people in the Middle East are learning how to have a democratic voice. There are a lot of Syrian Americans here who understand that, and you're interacting with your congress members, and you're able to do that. But one thing that will help fight that prejudice is to be able to stay strong and be able to keep a hope that you can do something, and that you can engage, and that everything you're doing here matters. I know that it seems like you probably feel like you're not accomplishing anything, or that it's taking a really long time and you're tired. But I know the sacrifices that everyone's making, because another thing that video got wrong is that just because it isn't happening here, because it is. There's a woman in the audience I respect very highly, Mustada Aman, and she's trying to teach my feeble mind Arabic. But she comes to class every day, and I know that she's had relatives who have died in this conflict, that her family is all over the place trying to help do what they can to save Syria. And yet she comes there and she talks about the beauty of the Arabic culture and the language, and she shares that with us. And I cannot say that she's not making a sacrifice. I cannot say that she's not a part of this revolution, that she is not doing something that matters, because both those things matter. Teaching us about the beauties of the Arabic culture and understanding that it takes time away from the loved ones and the support with them to help them accomplish what they need. And so I just want to say to all Syrians that as long as we continue to raise our voices and say that without justice for the world's most vulnerable, there is no justice. The path towards justice for us now starts with a free Syria. So I want to leave you with that. What we need is a free Syria. That way we can be free human beings. Thank you.
Derek is actually a student of Professor Iman Arabi Katbi. So. speakers today really brought us back to the same two messages I started with in the beginning. And that is that our revolution is still going on and will still go on, and we will still support our people inside Syria. But that it also takes a lot of communication to create advocacy, and advocacy does indeed work. It's working slowly for us, but it is working, and we have to stand together and speak together and make it happen. And one of the messages we all need to take away is we will all have different opinions. You know, whether we're Arabs or Syrians or Christians or Muslims or Jews or whatever, we're all going to have different opinions, and it's okay. But that's what democracy is all about. This is what we're fighting for, and democracy is about different opinions coming together to form a government. So be proud of that. Just learn to respect each other's opinions, and I promise you we can make happen those two things. So I know for just the next few minutes we wanted to open it up to a Q&A. Would you have questions for SAG? Or if you have questions for Dr. Hashim or Derek or Clay, and I'm going to ask Hassan if he can help me with the Q&A session, please. So if you do have questions, please stand up. We'll come to you, and we'll bring you a microphone. Brother Hassan, Clay has a question.
Yes. Forgive me, I was told I have to hold the microphone, so it's not meanness of me, but that's the instructions that I was given. For the respective time only.
The only thing I wanted to point out about the Vietnam War is many Americans think in terms of the 58,000 Americans that died in the Vietnam War. It was actually 3 million, which is why I made this film, Vietnam American Holocaust. And in addition, the thing I would say you should take from the Vietnam War is, you know, I read a speech by Ho Chi Minh written in 1946 where he said, if it takes 10 years, we will carry forth this revolution. Well, it took 30 years. They started in 1945. They had their independent country in 1975. It doesn't matter. Your revolution may take 30 years too.
I hope not.
I hope not too. I hate to think about going through something like that. It's 1 more year, 2 more years away this happened. But that's all I want to say about it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please, let's open it up. What's in your mind? What's in your heart? It's okay. This is the gathering where you can give us your positive, your negative. We have experts, so don't be shy. I know the Syrians are shy when they're come together. When they're in a small group, they're different. I know you. So I have a question for you. May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. I noticed that we as a community, we need to build a strong community. As a Syrian, we've never came together. There's always a distrust. Alhamdulillah, we're breaking that barrier. But why other Syrians are not coming? I always have the trouble that whenever we have events, we call the Syrian and there's reluctance. I don't know why. I need an answer, so I hope that somebody can make a comment. Is it distrust, different opinion? So please, I was told not to give the microphone. I'll hold it.
Thank you. I think many of us don't know about the event. I came here to Irvine 8 months ago, and I was looking myself for some activities in the area. And this is the first event I'm attending, but I was told there's an event here today. So I think there is a problem, let's say, in advertising the events.
Thank you. This is a very good point. Thank you. Does anybody know that we have a Facebook page called SAG LA and SAG Announcements and SAG Discussion and other like groups like texting? We do all that. So as a community, I noticed honestly that we are lacking the communication. So please, maybe we can sign your email. We have an email list.
And I would love to know, how do you feel we should best communicate to you? What is the best way to reach
I
you?
think Facebook is the best way. Facebook is an excellent way, yeah. We all use Facebook.